Hello, hello, Lakeisha. You are our first. There are several signed up for today, and I'm here to offer you conflict resolution skills, but I'm also here to answer any questions you have. So I looked at your profile on LinkedIn. It's very impressive. If you want to stay off camera, that's great. If you want to put anything into the chat, I'd love to find out what brought you here so I can tailor this to your needs as well as everyone else who shows up. So welcome. And we have another person joining us. So we're going to get started. So welcome to Conflict Resolution, Tools for Your Practice and Your Life. Let's take a deep breath. I thank you for coming. I thank you for showing up live. And if you're watching the replay, this is for you too. My name is Linda Kroll. For 35 years, I've been an internal family systems therapist, mediator, attorney. I'm a Chopra Certified Teacher of Meditation, Yoga, and Ayurveda. And I have blended my therapy training, my spiritual coaching, my mediation and law, and created a process called compassionate mediation. And what compassionate mediation is a way to resolve conflict. So as you're joining me, we are going to get tools today that you can use to resolve conflict. So just think about it for a moment. Take a deep breath with me here. Let's bring ourselves present. I know you have a lot of places to be, but if we spend about 20, 25 minutes, I'm hoping you'll walk away with some actionable tips that you can use for your practice or your life. And because we're live, I've used to do this on LinkedIn or on Facebook, and I would do it live, and I would talk to the little green light that I'm speaking to right now. But I wanted to really interact more with the people who need me. So you're here, and whatever you want to put into the chat, if you want to put it to me personally, or if you want to put it to everyone, I would love for you to let me know why you're here. If you're here personally, professionally, if you have any specific questions you have for me, I'll speak to those, and I'll give you a general overview. So let's talk about conflict, which is present in all of our lives, in all of our relationships, possibly with a partner, a parent, a child, a coworker, a friend, an employee, an employer, and finding ways to be with that conflict where you're not reacting, you're responding. And you're responding from what I'm calling your higher self. So I see a lot of people for individual counseling, couples counseling, divorce mediation. I train other therapists and mediators and coaches on using these skills. But I want to give you the tools that I do in my first session. So let's say you have a client who comes to see you, or you are wanting to learn skills for yourself. The first thing I'd ask is, how can I help? And a lot of times people don't know what they want. They think they might want to leave a relationship. I know they want the other party to change, which is not possible. They don't really think so much about how they can change themselves in the relationship, because what they've done is they've created a lot of bad habits. They've either been hurt for so long that they put walls up around their heart. They've had filters through which they're judging the other party. They may have pushed aside some feelings of hurt and sadness that they didn't want to deal with. They may have tried to manage as best they can by being nice, pleasing, hardworking, caretaking, stoic. They may put on what I call a pseudo self, where you look like you're trying to be calm and clear and connected, but you're really simmering on a lot of these feelings and telling yourself the same stories. He always does this, she never does that. So when they come to see me, or they come to see you, or you're dealing in your own life, what you're dealing with is the inability that each person has to come from what I'm calling their higher self. And in internal family systems, what we talk about in terms of higher self is that essence in us that's calm, clear, and compassionate. You know those moments? Take a deep breath with me here. In fact, taking a belly breath is a way to access more self-energy, because we're not always in self, and our clients aren't in self. And in internal family system, we talk about parts that people are in. So what we do in internal family systems, and what I do when I'm working with the client, is help people get to their higher self. So what does it mean to be in your higher self? Well, I often ask people if they have a spiritual word, a word for spirituality. Now, I'm not asking if they're religious, but I'm asking, do they believe in God? Do they believe in a higher power? Do they believe in the energy of the universe? What is their word for an energy that is bigger than they are? And that is what I'm calling self. That's what I'm calling higher self. Because in higher self, hold on, I'm trying to get myself to the center here. There we go. Trina, good to see you. I'm glad you're here. I said, please put into the chat, anyone that's here, any questions you have for me anytime. If I'm talking about something and it brings up something for you, I really want this to be as interactive as possible. I do a lot of lives, but what I'm looking for is to meet you where you are and give you what you came for. So what we're talking about is how in internal family systems, we talk about having a self, capital S self. And when we talk about resolving conflict, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get ourselves to our higher self. We're trying to get our clients to their higher selves. And I have a templated first interview that I do that in 15 minutes explains to clients what it means to be in self. And then in the first session, I do a guided meditation that I'll tell you later how to get a hold of to help them feel what it's like to be in their higher self. Because when people look at a situation from a higher level of consciousness, when they are looking at it not from parts that are angry or hurt or judgmental or withholding or blaming, you know what I mean. When you're not looking through those filters and you're willing to put your wall down around your heart, you learn to speak for your parts instead of from your parts. So you have parts that are hurt or sad or scared. You have parts that are angry. You have parts that are terrified, possibly about the future. But first, you have to be compassionate to yourself and understand what's going on internally for you. And I see a lot of people for either marriage counseling or divorce mediation, and they come with different agendas. They come with the agenda of wanting to change the other person. Sometimes they're not sure if they want to stay or go. Oftentimes I get a couple where one wants to stay and the other one wants to leave. And I'm sure you have that a lot, whether it's your own relationship or people that you counsel. And when that happens, talking about the specific issues is not as difficult as helping each person get to self. So as I meet them in the first session, I ask them if they have any questions about me. And if you have any questions about me, please put them in the chat. I mentioned that I'm a therapist for 35 years, internal family systems, mediator, attorney, a spiritual coach. And I also teach my clients and other professionals how to compassionately communicate, how to connect to this energy that I'm calling your best self, how to let go of all those limiting beliefs and judgments and stories you keep telling yourself, not just about the other person, but about yourself. A lot of people that are in an unhappy relationship are telling themselves stories about themselves. I was stupid to say, how could I take it? And they're more mad at themselves than they are at the other person. So compassionate communication starts with compassion for yourself. And connecting to your best self is learning how to unburden the burdens that you've had. And I'll talk more about that. But when you compassionately communicate, you connect to your best self. You do that by meditating, journaling, going to therapy and unburdening your parts. Some people pray, some people go walk in nature. There are things that you focus on where self-care becomes the priority. And taking care of yourself and having compassion for yourself is where it starts. My friend Sark calls herself a full cup of love, sharing her overflow with the world. I'd like to think we could all become full cups of compassion, sharing our overflow with the world. And I always say that love is the answer, but it starts with loving yourself. So if I could wave a wand and you could right now, immediately, in this moment, totally and completely forgive yourself for any decision you've made or haven't made, would you do it? Because in that forgiveness, you get more gratitude, and more gratitude is another element of self. So the 8 C words of self in internal family systems are calm, clear, compassionate, curious, connected, created, confident. I'm going to forget one, but there's 8 C's. I'll show you later. And gratitude is another one, because when you're in gratitude, you're not in judgment. You're in the present moment. So helping your clients, helping yourself do that is part of what the tools are. So take a deep breath. And again, if you have anything you want to put into the chat, please do. If you want to send it to me individually so no one else sees it, I'd be happy to respond to it. So we're talking about helping people get to their higher self, because that's how you resolve conflict. At the Chopra Center, we talked about higher consciousness. That many people, we have different levels of consciousness. I won't go deep into it, but we have the sleep state, the dream state, the waking state, the transcendent, the cosmic, and the divine. And in every level, you become more aware. So when you get to your higher self, you're no longer reacting from fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. That's a new one for me. Fawn is when people try to placate the other person because they're afraid of their anger or they're afraid of the reaction. A lot of us codependents are great fawners. But we don't react that way. We start to respond, and we respond from our higher self because we learn to trust that we do have a higher self. Okay, there is a question here, and I'm going to answer it. How to best speak from your own parts when your partner is not in their best self mode? That's a great question because that happens all the time. And we're going to talk a little bit about the miracle of empathy. Because just because you need to speak for a part of you doesn't mean the other person has any bandwidth to hear it, which is why then you go journal. And what we do in IFS, great. And Trina, you have to go. I want to tell you all, if you have to go to lindakroll.com/roadmap, and you'll get a roadmap of this process. You'll also find a way to sign up for a 15-minute free session with me where I can talk more specifically. So anyone who has to get off early, lindakroll.com/roadmap or lindakrollbook.com will give you a free chapter of my book. And I'll try to circle back by 10:30 to remind you of that in case anyone else has to go. So thank you for letting me know. And also, let's go back to what do you do when you want to speak for your parts, but somebody can't listen, which happens all the time. It means that they are blended with parts that might be angry, might be walled, might be judgmental, and they may have to do their own work to unburden them if they want to, and they may not want to. They may feel that they need to stay angry. A lot of times people have been in relationships where they've been codependent for a long time, and they've settled for things, and they've turned the other cheek, and they've exiled their feelings. They pushed aside their sadness, their hurt, and they've managed. They've managed by being as nice and pleasing and caretaking as they could be. But when they can't manage the pain anymore, they do extreme behaviors. And sometimes those extreme behaviors are to put a wall up and say, I'm not putting my wall down. And they're not putting their wall down, not so much because they don't trust you, which is possibly because of how the relationship has been, but they can't put their wall down because they don't trust themselves. They don't trust themselves not to stay in a dysfunctional situation. So they might need time. They might need time to process. They might need time to separate. They might need time to do whatever they need to do. So the work that needs to be done when someone else isn't available is to do your own work, to learn how to be available to yourself, to find a quiet spot. And what we do in IFS is we visualize a part. So if you're looking at a part of you that's very sad or very scared, you can actually have a dialogue with that part. And sometimes what I do when I journal is I write at the top of a page, self, capital S self, and I say, who can I help? And then I see what part needs my attention. So if it's a sad part, I let that sad part just write everything that she's sad about. I'm sad about this, I'm sad about that, I'm sad about this. And then when I've gone on for pages, I then connect to my higher self, prayer, meditating. And then I write a love note to that part of me from me. Dear sadness, I see you. I'm here for you. I'll be with you. And oftentimes that sadness is not just from what's going on in the present, it's what happened in the past. So you learn to find the inner child that was sad many, many years ago, that was sad because their parents didn't give them what they needed. And you learn how to unburden that inner child, which is what I do with all my clients. And then you speak for your sadness. But you're the one who listens first if the other party isn't available. So I hope that that answers the questions. Feel free to go further with any other question you have. So back to higher self and parts and my first interview. So a client will come in, I'll ask if they have any questions about me, and then whether they're coming in as an individual, because this work, compassionate mediation, works with individuals. And the book that I wrote, Compassionate Mediation, How to Add Passion to Your Marriage or Compassion to Your Divorce, you can get the free chapter at lindakrollbook.com, outlines what somebody should do when they're not sure if they want to stay or go. I have a 6-hour compassionate mediation program that I can tell you more about. But there are ways for you to show up in your relationship, whether your partner buys into it or not. In other words, when you bring more higher self energy, when you do more healing, when you learn to speak for your parts instead of from your parts, because often what happens is that the inner child that didn't get his or her needs met learned how to manage. And you can be hardworking, you can be stoic, but a lot of people either manage with anger or get angry as a way to protect that inner child. And the parts that you're reacting from, or your clients are reacting from, are really masking the sadness underneath. So helping your clients learn the miracle of empathy is also what I offer to my clients and I want to offer to you. So I just want to share a couple things with you right now, just to give you a brief overview of what I was talking about. So give me a moment to go to my, here we go. There we go. Okay, so this is what I wanted you to see. I used to have this on, as an easel in my office, but I don't need it anymore because I can usually describe it to people. So when we're in self, we're all those C words and grateful. We exile the parts that are hurt, sad, scared, and vulnerable because maybe our parents were addicts. Maybe our parents couldn't give us what they need because they didn't get what they needed. Some of us exile our anger, including us codependents. We definitely exile our anger. But this is the what about me? Who's going to love and care for me the way I need? And then we go out in the world and we manage. We manage by being nice, pleasing, caretaking. We manage with all these issues that we have here. And here's where the pseudo self comes in. It's like how we think we should be, what we want to show the world. It's our mind, it's our ego, it's our stories. But then when we can't manage those exiled feelings, we get extreme in some ways. We get addicted to things. Some people go have an affair in order to numb. We get depressed. We eat too much, gamble, have panic attacks, get enraged, go shopping, put up walls, or say, get me out of here, I want a divorce. Not that getting a divorce is a bad thing, but getting divorced from an extreme part is reactive. It causes a flood of parts all over the place. And what happens when we get extreme is we can now think about how guilty we feel about whatever we just did and vow not to do it again. And we're still exiling all those sad feelings that we didn't talk about in the first place. So what I have people do is learn the miracle of empathy. Excuse me. And what we do with empathy is to talk for our parts. In other words, we talk, let's see if I can open this one now for you. Here we go. So all of this is in my training and all of this is in my program and all of this is available to you. I think if you go to the roadmap, I can send you this. I think I also have it at the Miracle of Empathy, lindakroll.com/empathy. But what we do here, let me just make it a little smaller. File, view, hold on, zoom out. Here we go. Just make it so you can see it better. Oops, it's going to be hard to see. Okay, don't you love live? It's worth it when I get there, but hold on. Let me get there. So what we do when we're dealing with empathy is we have people talk from their higher self. And what I do in higher self energy is give you a meditation. So when people come to me, I'll come back to that. When people come to me and I ask them, do you have any questions about me? Then I have a series of questions. And here are the questions. For those of you who are professionals, I want to give you the questions. Ready? The first thing is, how can I help? Because I don't know. Are they looking to create a new relationship? Are they looking to think about a divorce? Are they thinking of quitting their job? What is the way I can help them? And then I ask a series of questions compassionately, but fairly rapidly. And I'll tell you why. Usually when someone comes to see you, they want to tell you their story. They want to tell you their story because they think you need to know all the facts in order to help them. I find that if somebody tells me their story, and I often tell them this, I could listen to you tell me your story for 45 minutes and you will feel marginally better that I witnessed, but you won't really feel better because nothing will have shifted. So I'm going to ask you a few questions and there'll be time to elaborate later, but here they are. And what I ask are these. With whom are you having conflict? What do they do that bothers you? How do you react? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? I sometimes ask, if I were talking to that other person, what would they tell me about you? What would they complain about? How do they feel? How do they react to you? And then I ask about their family of origin. So if I'm seeing an individual, this is the conversation I have with the individual. If I'm seeing a couple, I have this conversation with each of them separately for 10 minutes, and then I put them back together. So I'm just asking the same questions privately. When I'm on Zoom, I used to have an office where I had a waiting room. Now I am on Zoom, so I'll put the other member of the couple in a waiting room and come back and get them. But the same questions. With whom do you have a conflict? What do they do? What do you do? What do you think? How do you feel? Same for them. And then I ask about families of origin. And this is always important. I do a little genogram on my notes where I ask them, tell me about your father, tell me about your mother, where are you and the sibling, how did the family get along, and were there any family secrets? And again, it's quick. I know they want to go into details, but I'm trying to get a framework for how they grow up. What are the stories they learned? What are the beliefs that they're believing now? And then I ask, and this is always helpful, is to ask them to describe the other party's family of origin. So once they describe that their husband grew up in an alcoholic home where his father was abusive and he never got what he needed, it makes sense that right now he can't give his wife exactly what she's looking for because he was never taught that. So once she realizes that her husband might be doing the best he knows how to do, there can be forgiveness, there can be more compassion, there can be more healing. Now, whether or not that's enough to create a new marriage, whether or not that's enough to create trust over time, time will tell. And in that time, both parties have to do their own work. And when I see couples, I usually offer them a session or sessions alone with me. And it's not that I'm taking sides, it's that I'm helping each of them process the pain from the past so that they can show up and do their work personally and then collectively. And when I do that, I do an unburdening with them. I help them go and retrieve that inner child, let go of all the energy and beliefs that they took on about themselves or their partner, and give it back to the universe and let it drain from their body and reclaim all those qualities that they lost under the burdens. So you could learn how to do all that. You can do it for yourself and you can do it for your clients. I will talk briefly about the fact that I do have a certification. And the certification, if you go to the roadmap, it gives you a 15-minute session with me in case you want to talk more about how you can study with me in a small group to learn this, because all the templates, all the videos, all the handouts, all the scripts, all of the meditations are available in that program. So let me know if you want to know more. I don't want to make this a sales pitch, but I do want you to know it's an option. So I'm going to give you a chance because, again, I've got 35 years of experience. I'm glad you're here. but put something in the chat or to me personally, if you'd like, so that I can help you with anything special that you came here to talk about. So even if you'd like more client information. And so let me, while you're thinking, I'm looking in the chat, but while you're thinking, I'll go on. So here's some tools. The tools are the questions that you ask in a very short time to get an overview of where they're each coming from. The other tool is my magic wand question. I ask each client, if you had a magic wand, what would you want to see happen? And that is very telling. I ask them individually because one party could say, I really want to get divorced in as calm a way as possible and be co-parents and get on with our lives. And the other party could say, I don't want to get divorced at all. Or one party could say, I want my child to stop using. And since that probably won't happen, I need to then focus them on Al-Anon or something that they're going to need to get help for themselves, because they're not going to change an addict. They can only change how they're being with an addict. And when you change how you're being with an addict, conflict resolves. So these are some of the questions that I ask in the first session. And the magic wand tells me where they're each going. Okay. And if I'm seeing an individual, then I'm seeing where they're going. And it also helps focus on what they want instead of what they don't want. Because usually when they come to see you, or if you're in a relationship, you're just telling yourself the same negative story. You have to change that story. So compassionate communication, again, connect to your best self. Let go of your limiting beliefs and judgments, all those thoughts and stories. Unburden pain from the past, which requires you to have compassion for yourself. Maybe get some therapy. Let me help you. There's ways that you can unburden. And the fourth is to relate from your heart. That's where that miracle of empathy sheet comes in. And if you want to direct message me, I'll send you the form for the miracle of empathy sheet. When someone's codependent, question come in, if a spouse is codependent, how does a partner help them other than focusing on one's own self? Well, if a partner has been codependent, then part of the problem is that they have made some decisions in the past and settled for things that they are mad at themselves for settling for. And sometimes codependents reach a point where they get mad as hell and don't want to take it anymore, basically. Not, maybe they might be afraid to say something, but what they're basically saying is, I don't want to forgive yet, because if I do, like I said, I'm going to be sucked back in, and I'm mad, and I've decided I don't want to tolerate it, take it, or placate it. But they haven't learned yet how to trust themselves enough to set appropriate boundaries, to ask for what they want and need, to say no. And so there's a limbo time where each party does have to do their own work. If there has been harm in the past caused by parts that, because I tell everybody that comes to see me, they've done the best they know how to do. Okay, they've done the best based on their level of awareness, based on how they grew up, based on what they were taught, but they can learn to do better. And once I get them back together, I explain to them how they have each exiled parts of themselves. They've each managed. That's how they got married. The way they get extreme is the way they trigger each other. And my job is to get them to self. And then I do about a 5-minute meditation. And I'm going to tell you how to get the meditation. If you go to, I'm going to put it in the chat, lindakroll.com/CCC. And what that has in it is the guided meditation that I do to help people get to self. Because as I'm explaining this to them, I'm saying, when we talk about withholding, judgment, anger, divorce, hurt, blame, fear, what's happening to your body? And just as I name that, I know that what happens to my body and your body is we constrict. So then I have them to put their hands on their belly and take 3 belly breaths. So do it with me now. Just take 1. Inhale, belly out. Exhale, belly button back to your spine. Good. Inhale, belly out. Exhale, belly button back to your spine. And what you're going to do is bring a little more self energy in. And then the meditation that's in the care kit, that's the compassionate communication care kit, has you ground down to the center of the earth, connect up to the sky, God, what's ever out there. Breathe even bigger and shower compassion to all of your parts. And then the meditation guides you to go to the base of a mountain, to leave all your parts behind, the bottom of the mountain, and go up in self as high up the mountain as you want. And from that place of self, there's more calm, there's more peace. And then I invite you to look at the other party at the top of their mountain without all of their parts attached and send compassion in their direction. And then you come back down the mountain and collect your parts, even if there's a part that you don't want to, because you're going to realize that once you give your own parts the attention they need to unburden the pain from the past, they carry their own wisdom in life. So I invite you, if you're in a relationship, to practice doing that, to bring more self-energy, to bring more compassion, to set your GPS for what you want. And then I'm going to invite you to let go and let God, which is a 12-step process. But because I do believe that every life experience is an opportunity for personal and spiritual growth, I'm going to offer you my spiritual graft, G-R-A-F-T. And I realize that most of our problems in life, most of our suffering is caused by our ego's wounds, our need to be right, our need to have it our way, the way things should be, the need to be in control, the need to know. And sadly, we operate that way until life offers us a challenge, a health issue, a conflict, a job loss, a death. And you have to either look at your life from the same egotistic perspective, where your managers are running the show and your extreme parts take over when they need some relief, or you can learn to live from your higher self, that spiritual center, that God energy inside of you, that witnessing awareness, that true self, that inner wisdom. That's what we help people do. That's what we do. And we do it for ourselves too, because if you're a professional who works with individuals and couples, there's a lot of parts coming at you. When I do a mediation sometimes I feel like a human liver, where there's this coming and this coming, and I have to translate and offer a way to communicate that isn't so fraught with tension and acrimony. So doing your own self-care, practicing for your own self is paramount. So the first tool that I'm going to give you is to practice your own self-care and be compassionate with yourself and understand how your parts are triggered in a session, understand how your client's parts are triggered. If you're not a professional in your own work, see how you are triggered and get some help so that you do get more self-energy. And then set your magic wand, set your GPS for what you want instead of what you don't want, and move in that direction. And if you fall off, then make an amend, because you can learn to speak for your parts instead of from your parts. Even now, when I'm talking about being in self, you're not Zen, you're not a Buddha, you're not, always calm, but you are aware when you are triggered and you learn to respond differently. You learn that when you automatically go to anger, what's really going on is there's some hurt and sadness underneath. And you have to have the courage, which is a C word, of self, to speak for your sadness. Now, in answer to the question, the other party may not have any room for empathy. And that might even hurt you more, which means you may have to make other decisions about the relationship. You may have to give it more time. You may have to do more healing. You may have to do more amends. But in the meantime, you take care of your sadness. And only because I have them here, I'm just going to show you real quickly. We all have an inner child, right? And we all have pain from our past. And sadly, what happens, and I lost my codependent down, guys try to look cool, and girls often try to be codependent. Do I have her? I have her. Here she is. And she goes around saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. Whoops. Again, don't you love life? So here's the codependent doll, and here's the guy trying to be cool, and pardon my gender bias, it could go either way, but you get the idea. And then when people don't get their needs met, they get mad and they fight. And that's how they come see me. That may be how they come see you. And what I'm helping you do is recognize that all parts are trying to be helpful. All parts have learned how to take on a certain role so that they can keep the person safe. So we're going to thank the anger for trying to run interference. We're going to tell our manager part so we don't have to look cool. We don't have to be codependent. And we can speak for our hurt, our pain, and our sadness in a way the other party can hear. And on the Miracle of Empathy sheet, it's in my programs and I can send you, the Miracle of Empathy sheet talks about talking about your exiled parts. So you ask someone if it's a good time to talk. You don't just say, I want to talk to you and expect them to be in self enough to hear you. Is now a good time? If it's a good time for the other person, great. In a perfect world, it would be, but otherwise they could find another time sooner than later. And you say, when something happened, I felt sad and hurt. Not I felt angry, not I felt neglected. Any of those ED words make them a perpetrator and you a victim. So what you're inviting yourself to do is speak for your sadness, your fear, your hurt. And then the other party, if they are available, will say, I hear how sad you are. I understand how sad you are. The understanding is usually missing. And I'm sorry. I don't want you to feel that way. I want to learn a new way to communicate. And I'm sorry. But since they don't have this training, you have to give empathy to them. And they may be in the mood for it, and you may just have to say it to yourself. So if you see somebody who's angry at you, know that underneath they're hurt. And in your mind, say, I see how angry you are because I know you're hurt. I understand why you're hurt. And I am sorry. I don't want to hurt you again. I want to learn a new way to communicate. And I'm sorry. And then they would say, thank you. And in the future, here's what we need to do. They may say in the present, we need to separate for a while. They may be done, sadly, and you may have to accept that. But there are ways to resolve conflict where you get to your best self, let go of your own limiting beliefs and judgments, unburden pain from the past, relate from your heart. You ask yourself the magic wand question, and you set your GPS for where you want it to go. And then just like GPS, if you fall off the path, you don't berate yourself. You make an amend and get back on. It's like when we turn the wrong turn, our car doesn't say, you stupid idiot, you made the wrong turn. It just says recalculating. So be gentle on yourself as you're resolving conflict. Recalculate, take a deep breath, do some healing, get to your higher self, bring your higher self with all those C qualities to your relationship. Help your clients get to self. Because even when I'm doing a divorce mediation, and sometimes people come to me and they really are ready to get divorced. They're both ready to get divorced. They don't want any marriage counseling. They're done with all this emotional stuff. But I tell them that if we don't do some healing, you're going to keep the same relationship during and after you separate and get divorced. So my first couple sessions are all about compassionate communication, doing some healing work. Now, if they're both invested in a divorce, I give them all the information in the first session that makes them feel that I do know what I'm going to offer them. And I tell them about assets and exploring options and understanding their rights and finances. And if you take my certification program, Compassionate Mediation Coaching Certification, I give you all that information so you could give it to them. Because a lot of times when people are having conflict, they really don't know if they want to stay or go. And what they need to do is have a safe place to talk about everything. And you become an expert in conflict resolution, not only to help them communicate, but also to give them all the information they need. Because it used to be, I married my college sweetheart. We were married for 20 years. And when we were looking at divorce, there was no system like compassionate mediation. We either had to go to marriage counseling when both of us had possibly one foot out the door, or we had to go to divorce mediators or attorneys before we were ready. But what you do with Compassionate Mediation Coaching Certification, if you have the skill set to become an expert to help people wherever there's conflict, and if divorce or separation is an option, you learn how to explore those options. You learn how to help people talk about what would happen if we had to sell the house. How would we nest? How would we co-parent? What assets would be entitled to? But you do it in compassionate mediation in a way that gives you the ability to go in either direction. And I always tell people that their first marriage is over because it's not about putting a patch on it. It's about learning how to communicate from their highest and best self to create the relationship they truly desire and deserve. So as you're teaching them how to compassionately communicate and heal from the past and offer some options, then they will decide, do I want to create a new marriage? What would it take? Do I trust the other party enough? Do I trust myself enough? Let's think about it. Or do we talk about a separation and divorce? But you help them through those conversations that can go on for weeks, months, and sometimes years. Because at every stage of conflict, there's something to resolve. And sometimes it's how to have a better marriage, how to have date nights, how to heal from an argument. That could be part of resolving conflict. But sometimes people need to know, what would it be if I separated? How would we navigate that? And then you talk about it because I tell you how to do that. I give you all the manuals, the templates, and we meet together every couple of weeks for 2 hours where you practice all the skills that I'm giving you. So get the roadmap, lindakroll.com roadmap, and join me for a 15-minute conversation, whether you want to join the certification or not. I'd love to meet you. I know that coming to a live event and being asked to participate is compassionate mediation is intended to give you the tools to talk about everything. It's not a number of sessions. It's how many ever sessions are needed for both parties to decide what's best for them and to communicate it in a safe way. And the more self-leadership there is, like I always say, the hard part isn't deciding on the asset division. The hard part is getting people to get to their higher self, where they can compassionately show up for each other. I wrote a settlement prayer the night before I got divorced that I brought to court. And sadly, because there was no compassionate mediation so many years ago, my divorce was a typical adversarial, costly, disruptive, painful process. But the prayer was, and the intention was, to come from our highest selves, to remember the love that we once had for each other and the beautiful children which our union has borne, to come down to this last task of asset division with a full heart, knowing that we showed up as much in self as possible, inviting our attorneys to work in the highest good for all concerned, and to know to the best that we could, we came from our hearts. So if you direct message me or send me a link, send me a message, I will send you the prayer and the empathy. But I would love to have you consider joining me in the Compassionate Mediation Coaching Certification. And if you also want some information about the Compassionate Mediation Program, which is for individuals and couples. So I'm going to stay on a couple more minutes to make sure that I've answered your questions, but I'm going to give you a brief review. So thank you for hanging in here with me. Thank you for listening to the replay. So here's some conflict resolution tools that you can use now in your practice and in your life. Number 1, do your own self-care. Do what you need to do to heal the wounds from your past, to show up with as much compassion for yourself as everyone else. Number 2, ask yourself the questions. Ask your clients the questions. What am I doing? What am I thinking? How am I being? What are my parts? What are the parts I'm pushing aside? How am I managing? What am I getting extreme with? And how is that affecting someone? And how can I forgive myself for all the ways that my behavior or my actions or inactions have hurt someone else? And be willing to be humble and make amends. And be willing to help your clients do all that. Give them a sheet where they can practice empathy with you, where you learn how to teach them exactly how to speak for their exiled parts, how to speak from the top of the mountain where they're not making excuses, defending, or rationalizing, but they're really listening to the pain and the sadness and the fear of someone else in a way that that party finally feels understood. And then that magic wand. What is that GPS? And here's the spiritual graft. I'll end on the spiritual graft. The spiritual graft is GRAFT. So we have our ego's wounds. Life has kicked us in the behind. It's not how we thought it should be. But here's what we do instead. We are grateful, G. We are grateful for whatever we do have. Even if we're looking at a divorce, we're grateful for the children, for the assets, for the life we've shared. RA, radical acceptance. It's different from unconditional love. It's a step further. It means that whatever is. We're not going to fight it. We're just going to be with it. Gratitude, radical acceptance. The F in grat is forgiveness. Forgive yourself. Forgive the other party. Eventually, you'll forgive your parents if you can for whatever they have done in terms of doing the best they could. Now, when you forgive someone, doesn't mean you have to interact with them. It just means you're off the hook, okay? And the T is trust. Trust in yourself, trust in your higher self, trust in God, trust in higher power, trust in me, trust in your therapist, trust in a process. So gratitude, radical acceptance, forgiveness, and trust are also some of the tools that will help resolve conflict. So I'm going to stay on as long as you would like, a few more moments. If you're joining the replay and you have a question for me, please get back to me. You can send me a message. You can go get my roadmap at lindakroll.com/roadmap. You can get the care kit, lindakroll.com/CCC. You can get, and in that CCC is not only the guided meditation to get to self, but there's a relationship assessment that you can take. And in that relationship assessment, it helps you take a look at, how am I showing up? Am I showing up in my highest self? Am I being confident and courageous and saying what I need? What do I know about my finances? What do I need to do to be my best self and bring my best self to myself and then to my relationships? So always remember that when people are thinking of divorce, they don't have to be a bag lady. They don't have to worry about losing their pants. You can become an expert in conflict resolution. You can realize that once you see somebody who is fighting and angry and bullish, and if you do any therapy or coaching and sometimes are intimidated by those parts of your clients. My father was manic depressive. He was angry all the time. I had a problem with anger, my husband's anger, and my client's anger at first. So I had to do my own work and heal that and recognize that underneath every angry person, oops, you didn't see the trick. Underneath every angry person is a sad person or a scared person. And having compassion for that teddy bear underneath, that inner child underneath, is also a major tool to resolve conflict. Compassion for yourself, compassionate communication, compassion for everyone else. And I'd love to help you learn more. So thank you so much for being here. lindakroll.com roadmap, lindakroll.com CCC/CCC, lindakrollbook.com. You'll get the first chapter for free. I also have a free Kindle book called Compassionate Divorce you can get on Amazon. And I'm here to help in any way I can. I really so appreciate you showing up live, showing up for the replay. I'd love to stay connected. And oh, thank you for the work you do. Oh, thank you so much, Lakeisha. I so appreciate it. She said, thank you for the work I do and for sharing your best self. And Jan asked the 8 C's of higher self. Yep. In fact, if I can, there's the empathy. Hold on, let me get to I'll show you the chart again. Okay. Calm, clear, compassionate, courageous, confident, curious, which is a big one. In other words, if you are having a problem with someone, don't judge and blame. Show up with a curious mind, kind of like, oh, that's interesting, versus letting them trigger you into, oh, that's hurtful and they are such and such. Curious, creative, connected, and I added grateful. So those are the C's of self. Let me get out of the share. And was I sharing? I don't know if I was sharing. Sorry. Anyway, those are the C's. Be curious, be compassionate, but first of all, be compassionate with yourself. And from my heart to yours, namaste. The light in me, the self in me, sees and appreciates the light and self in you. And I look forward to staying connected. I'll talk with you soon. Bye for now. Bye-bye.